a great break, time to refresh, etc. But I'd like to kick off the next session for the afternoon. We've had, I think, a great opening in the morning, some really high-level perspectives. For this afternoon and this segment of the afternoon, we want to focus, take a little bit of a step back and really shift to a focus on people, right? And this whole conversation around financial inclusion, inclusive insurance, what are we doing, what are we seeing in that space, and how can we do more and how can we do better? So as part of this session on financial resilience and inclusive growth, we're going to kick off with a presentation and a conversation really with two, I think, really important supporters and members and key actors within the IDF. So I'd like to hand over to Katharine Pulvermacher, who's the Executive Director of the Microinsurance Network, as well as Jan Kellett, who's the Special Advisor, Finance Sector Hub, and Team Leader of the Insurance and Risk Financing Facility at UNDP, to help us to frame this section of the discussion. So over to you.
Thank you. I'll let you go first. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So, we are going to have a bit of a chat up here, myself and Katharine. And what we're going to do is essentially what Ekeswe mentioned, which is really make the links between where we've got to so far and start to talk about what it means for families, businesses, really in the face of risk, but really make the link between really development and insurance. As I've said before, you know, for UNDP, it is all about development. And Microinsurance Network is one of our partners, so it's great to have this opportunity. So we're just going to take you through a few slides. We're going to ask each other a few questions. And I think that's it. Are we okay with that, Katharine?
We're okay with that.
So if this looks unusual, it's because it feels unusual up here, at least to me. So don't worry about that. Yes.
I wonder if we can see the slides down there. Does that happen?
That would be helpful. Can the slides be mirrored here? There we go. So over to you, Katharine.
Great. So, I think we heard a lot about uncertainty and how difficult things are. And I think, Jan, the UNDP produces this amazing report every year. I know I've been looking at the Human Development Indicator Index for 30 or more years. Can you tell us a little bit about the most recent report and what it's telling us?
Yep, so colleagues, just for you to be aware, as Katharine has just mentioned, so the UNDP produces this report each and every year. It's called the Human Development Report, and it looks essentially at human development. It's built essentially on an index which has been tracking development through a whole set of different indicators for 30 or so years. It's called the Human Development Report. It's probably one of the most influential reports, even well beyond UNDP and actually for the UN in general, because it is talking about development. This year's report, as you can see, the title, Uncertain Times, Unsettled Lives, Shaping Our Future in a Transforming World. I would hope that's a little bit of a call to action for the insurance community right there. It should be in those words, uncertainty, unsettledness, should be sending a few triggers. And actually insurance does feature very heavily for the first time.
So I know you have some rather gloomy slides to show us about where we actually are. Can you just sum up very briefly, what does this slide tell us? What is the bad news?
So the world of uncertainty, that's essentially what the slide is doing, and it's basically giving us three sort of intersecting worlds of uncertainty, and perhaps in a way which has not quite been all together at the same time and so intense. So on the one hand, sweeping societal transformation, populism, different kinds of voting patterns, fundamentalism, extremes rather than the, if you like, shared values right in the center. The Anthropocene, essentially the assault on the environment, which I'm sure all of us are seeing around the world. And then widespread intensifying polarization. And this is a whole set of things which everybody, each family, each community is living. I'm sure we know this from our own experience, which is, in terms of its intensity, has never been seen before.
Absolutely, and perhaps we can add to those layers as well, because we talk here about uncertainty, but then we also know that the world has become increasingly volatile, it's become increasingly complex. We talk about compounded risks and increasing ambiguity. So it all really seems rather hopeless. And I think you also have another slide, don't you, that shows us something about how many countries, what percentage of countries things have got worse recently. Can we have a look at that before?
Yeah, maybe we're going to do it in two separate slides. So, friends, colleagues, this is the slide. I think we say it very clearly there. The Human Development Report sees the first ever decline. So this is a composite of human development across all countries. And you can see since 1990, I think the first report was 1988, human development has been on an upward trajectory. And you can see even through the global financial crisis, 2008, 2009, in general, despite some countries falling, the upward trend was there. And we had a projected trend 2020, 21, it was still upward. But the actual trend fell. And that's largely, I'm sure you unsurprisingly would understand, largely due to COVID and its impact on communities and families around the world. So this goes directly to this slide. So this is all the countries that have fallen year by year. Some have gone up, some have fallen, and you can see that each and every year some countries fall down in terms of their human development, conflict, other kinds of risks, perils, etc., which has affected the country. You can see 2009, 20 countries saw a decline in human development, largely driven by the financial pressures. But here we have 2020, 2021. 87 countries in 2020 saw a decline in human development in just that 1 year alone, and then 51 in 2021. So definitely a major pressure and a significant impact on human development.
And this is really affecting individuals, isn't it? It's affecting a lack of confidence, a sense of hopelessness, despair. We've seen a rise in mental illness. So is there actually any hope?
There is hope, but I just want to show you this before we show hope, because this is the negativity side, and then we're going to go into the hope.
Please stay in the room, okay? Don't leave yet.
Do not leave the room. Sorsha, can we just bar those doors? This is a survey which is done basically by essentially scraping information from 14 million periodicals, journals, articles, books and so on since the 1900s, which talks about issues of negativity and how it's tracked. And you can see basically up to the 2020 about essentially in English, German and Spanish speaking articles, and so this is the most peak we've ever seen in terms of negativity. So definitely a challenge. But, so these are the various pieces, and can I just run through this? Is that okay? So this is the various pieces, if you like. Planetary change mentioned, uncertainty, transition, polarization. We have gaps in terms of policies and cultural mismatches, etc. But what I want to do is focus on this left-hand side, which is really key. Enhancing social arrangements through investment, insurance, and innovation. And actually, if you read the Human Development Report, it's quite clear that insurance is the real key. It's almost like an antidote to uncertainty. And I think that's actually how we should see it as well. And of course, the insurance community is heavily engaged in both investment and innovation as well. So this is a real call to action from the Human Development Report. There is a lot of negativity in it, but if you read that last chapter, it's saying, this is what the global community can do. And this is actually what the insurance community should and can do with the development community.
And a lot of it, of course, is about safety, isn't it? Making people feel safe, giving them protection nets.
Yeah.
And that is what insurance is doing.
That is true.
Right, yeah.
So, now we're going to go on to, I'm going to just have to, because I like to look at this board, excuse me for moving back here. So now we're moving perhaps onto the more solution side of things and how inclusive insurance is one of those antidotes to what I've been putting forward, Katharine. So can you tell us what is happening with this graphic here?
Okay, so just one more thing. You did notice, everyone, didn't you, that there was a 6 in one of those slides, right? We were talking a lot about 6s yesterday. So I just did want to point that out, because I do think that the good news is that we can reverse this trend. Now, I'm an economist. I've always been interested in income levels, income demographics, amongst other things. And so here what you have is a pyramid, and it is an income pyramid. And it is rather indicative, but based on realistic proportions, which come from Pew Global Research. And basically, this divides the world up into 3 segments, right? You have the affluent, which you can see at the very top. The colors don't really mean a lot, so don't think that green is necessarily good. But at the top, you have the affluent, which is the market that the insurance sector globally is currently serving, predominantly, right? At the bottom, you have the poor, so extremely poor, people who can't actually afford insurance, living on less than $2 a day. And in the middle, you have this massive missing middle, which our insurers' colleagues refer to as the emerging consumers. They're living on $2 to $20 a day. It's the emerging middle class at the top. At the bottom, it's people that have just emerged from poverty that we don't want to fall back into poverty from any perspective. And what we've done is, and what we do every year at the Microinsurance Network, is we have this flagship exercise, one outcome of which is a report, which is available for free. It's in the public domain. You can go and read it. And what we do is primary research in specific countries, engaging with the insurers in those countries to find out how many people are covered to close this protection gap, what we call the people protection gap. And I think we've lost the titles at the top of our slides here, which is a pity. But our goal at the Microinsurance Network and in the Inclusive Insurance Working Group of the IDF is to close the people protection gap. And what we know based on the data that we have received from the 34 countries that we covered last year is that only 8%, up to 8%, this is still a very conservative estimate, of emerging consumers had any form of insurance cover in these countries. So I do believe that there's room for hope. So imagine that we're sitting here in Zurich in 2030. Imagine if this pyramid that I was updating and showing you then looked like this. Can you go to the next slide? This is what we want to see. And the good news is that I really believe that it's achievable, right? And I think there's enough know-how and passion in this room. And there's certainly enough know-how and passion amongst the MINS members who may or may not be members of the IDF to actually make this happen. And it's one of what I would cast as the low-hanging fruit. We've seen a lot of talk about these terrible problems that seem very, very complex and difficult. And no one is saying is it's easy to reach them, but we know that there are solutions there that exist and work. So let's have a look at some of the numbers, shall we?
Yeah, maybe just before that, I'd like to say, this is actually, perfect messaging also for UNDP, because actually when I'm thinking at how some of our own articulation, even as an institution, is about that we should be working with the most vulnerable, the most poor. And actually I'm pushing back on that slightly to say, that's fine, there are insurance and risk financing solutions for that population, that poor. But actually what we should be focusing on in UNDP as the development arm of the UN is focusing on those people who have pulled themselves out of poverty. But one shock of any of the many hazards that we know about could actually put them down into this poor. And we know there's evidence, clear evidence of that happening. So that's actually a very core message also for us. So there's a lot of data here, Katharine. What is going on here?
The good news, again, is that you don't have to absorb every single data point on the slide because it's all in the report. But just to say, let's just take away the key point here. So I mentioned that we look specifically for data on how many people are covered and make an estimate of how many people are not covered, who therefore actually represent a significant market opportunity. We do some estimate as well about what does this represent in financial value terms, because for this to work, it has to be financially and economically sustainable for the companies that are involved. Otherwise, it will implode. It will be a 3-year pilot, and then it will go nowhere. So we're looking at it from sustainability from both sides. Customer value is incredibly important because that is also what drives uptake. And basically what we see is, of course, a split in uptake in different regions and different countries. But overall, this is a market that is very far from saturated. So in those countries, the segment that is also saturated is this affluent component of the very small percentage of people that are salaried, and even some of those are not covered. So it really does represent both a business opportunity and a development necessity.
Yeah, so when you talk about that 8% earlier of people surveyed essentially have some insurance product, that means 92% do not. But they could have, and they should have.
Yeah.
At least many of them, and that's part of the message.
Exactly, and I won't tell the story about the two shoe salesmen who went to Africa, because we've probably all heard it before, but I do see this as an opportunity, and I see it as a possibility to make real and meaningful change, and for all of us here in this room to leave an incredible legacy
Excellent. Do we have any more slides? I can't remember if that was it.
We do have one more slide.
One more slide.
We have two more slides.
Is this the final
actually.
one?
This is the second final one.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
So
to show how well prepared we are, by the way.
So there, you know, what is important here as well is that this links to different verticals. So all of you are in different business lines, right? The good news is there's something for everybody here, right? Whether you're engaged in climate risk, whether you're property and casualty, whether you're more focused on health or life. The good news is there is some good business that can be done, but it does need support, right? So, you know, one thing that I'd really like to do on this next slide is to just pull out who has been supporting this kind of work. So this is our major exercise that we do at the Microinsurance Network every year. It takes up about a third of our annual resources. And this year's study, which was published in April with a wonderful event in Washington, D.C., and followed up with a series of events since then, including this one. You know, we wouldn't be able to do this if it weren't for the support of the government of Luxembourg, for sure, UNDP, AXA Emerging Customers, which has been supporting the report and the study since 2017, every single year in and out. And Swiss Re Foundation, who came in last year. Munich Re Foundation has come back this year, which is great. And Barents Re and the Insurance Federation of Egypt, which provides the Arab version of the report, which is pending. Yeah. That said, this support is great. We still don't have enough support to carry out this great work, which doesn't cost a lot of money, but it does cost something. And that benchmark is really needed to track in an honest and independent way the progress that is being made to close the people protection gap. There's nothing else that does it.
Yeah. So I think maybe that's a bit of a call to action there. There are some resources required to keep that landscape report going and deepen and widen it. So colleagues, do consider that. Do we have a sort of final message, you think, from your side? So we started off with the uncertainty, but we positioned insurance as an antidote to that uncertainty. How does that sit with you, and how does it feed into what Ken and the panel are going to come up with next? How would you look at that?
Well, I think what I'd like to do is feed it back into some of the conversations that I've heard yesterday and this morning, which is, in a way, to offer support. The Microinsurance Network is, it's not a place that has deep financial resources, but we have also incredible know-how and experience that goes back more than 20 years. And I see this time and again. I'm amazed by connecting different members in different geographies who can very quickly accelerate their learning and apply innovative solutions that have been implemented successfully to reach scale in one country, and adapt those to reach scale very quickly in another country. For example, the most recent example was someone in Pakistan that we paired with someone in Ecuador. I mean, you wouldn't think it, but this is the kind of magic that can happen. And I'd really invite those of you that are exploring this space and puzzled and bewildered about it, reach out to us. You know, we're friendly and we don't bite. And we also don't always ask for funding.
Okay, that's good to know. So I think that's it. I don't think we have any other slides. I think now we are due to, are we calling upon Ken to come up to Ken?
We are calling upon
Ken. Are you doing that?
Thank you, Jan, yes. So thank you very much, Jan and Katharine, for that. The very well prepared duo, and for that framing for the conversation that's to come. But I would now like to invite Ken Mungan. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I would now like to invite Ken Mungan, who's the chairman of Milliman, but also sponsor of a lot of work that we are doing within the IDF's Inclusive Insurance Working Group, and also a member of our steering committee, to lead the discussion that we're going to be having on building better protection systems with inclusive insurance. So over to you, Ken.
Thank you very much, Ekeswe. So I've now reached the point where I have to get out my reading glasses, otherwise just simply doesn't work. We're going to be talking about building better protection systems with inclusive insurance. And before I invite our panelists up, I just wanted to share a couple of very brief comments. And I want to make it clear that we all work in a system that we understand well, which I'll call developed world insurance, and that I see inclusive insurance as a system that involves some fundamental changes. And so we had some great examples just this morning about changing systems from Mario Greco. And they might seem like simple ones, but they were changes that affected all of us in this room. What did he talk about? The plastic bottles were gone, replaced with reusable glasses, reusable cups, water spouts, and everybody freaked out. Where's my plastic bottle? I can't live without it. And then he also talked about what? The printers were gone, the paper was gone. People freaked out, but they adapted. Do we have a quick video that we can show? Kip, were you able? We weren't able to get the video. Okay, so imagine yourself watching this video, and what it is here, you can see it on my phone. It's what I was doing. It's what I was doing last week, and so this is a very relaxing video of me sailing along the coast of Florida. And this was amazing because 5 dolphins came up to the sailboat. And they just, for around half an hour, they just swam right along with the sailboat. It was a magical moment of sailing. And as many of you know, I love sailing, been sailing for a long time. And I'm very familiar with traditional sailboats, which have diesel engines and diesel generators. And you try to sail, but when the wind's not so good, you turn on the diesel engine and off you go. But this sailboat, my sailboat Coconut that I was sailing last week, was different in discrete ways. And my friends walked on it and they started looking around. They were like, where's the diesel engine? I'm like, it's gone. It was replaced with an electric engine. Where's the diesel generator? It's gone. It was replaced by 2 levels of solar, permanent solar on the deck and temporary solar to deploy when the conditions are calm. And also, what we found most amazing was that when we're sailing along, we turn on hydrogeneration. We use the force of the water to spin the propeller, and the propeller becomes a turbine and generates electricity. That generated even more electricity than the solar. The idea of Coconut is very simple. We're replacing traditional sailing with sustainable sailing. Energy is all around you. All we have to do is pick it up. And it was a little bumpy at first. Not everything worked right, but we got everything fixed out by the end of the week, and the boat was going along just wonderful, and the dolphins came along and they loved it. My point with this story is very simple. Systems don't change by themselves. Systems change when leaders step up and change them. And if you think of changing from traditional insurance or developed world insurance to inclusive insurance, leaders are going to need to step up and change those systems in discrete ways. The insurance enterprise operates along different dimensions. Insurance is a risk management enterprise, but it's also a technology enterprise, a distribution enterprise, and an investment enterprise. Leaders throughout our industry are stepping up and changing this system in discrete ways along all these dimensions. And my message today is very simple. You are the leaders. You are the people who will change the system, but you are not alone. There are pathfinders among you who will show you the way. And these pathfinders are our panelists today. So I'd invite them to come on up. And we're going to start with Solomon. So let me quickly introduce everybody. Come on up, panelists. So Solomon Thomas is the Chief of Innovative and Alternative Finance for Children in the private sector at UNICEF. He's going to start us off with a keynote, and then he'll join the panel along with Ashok Shah, the Group CEO of APA Insurance, Garance Wate-Richard, CEO of AXA Emerging Customers, and Kathy Bauman-McLeod, Senior Vice President, Director of the Adrian Arsh Rockefeller Foundation and Resilience Center of the Atlantic Council. So, Solomon, please share us an example about what you're doing at UNICEF.
All right. First of all, it's a privilege to be here today. I am a newbie in this field, so bear with me. I do apologize in advance if I get any of the jargon incorrectly. But over the next few minutes, I was asked to share about an initiative that we did called UNICEF Today and Tomorrow, which we launched at COP27. And I was asked to share the lessons learned and how we designed and implemented this structure, and also talk about some of the challenges. So as we move forward, the first lesson that we learned was that before we start any type of design and solution around innovation, we need to start off with the problem first. So what is the problem? As you can see, the number of climate-related disasters has increased exponentially over the last 50 years. More than anyone, children bear the brunt of these disasters. 1 billion children, nearly half of the world's population, child population, are exposed to extremely high climate risk. As one example, in 2022 in Mozambique, 2 cyclones hit the country. Thousands of schools were destroyed, affecting more than 200,000 children. Earlier this year, Cyclone Freddy destroyed thousands of more schools, as well as health clinics, tripling the country's already high number of cholera outbreaks. We also see that there was also funding problems. When climate-related disasters occur, unless the event is visible in the media, the emergencies are always underfunded. And when funding does come in, it's often timing gaps are there, and it's not flexible. Additionally, we see that parametric risk transfer instruments try to address these problems, but from UNICEF's perspective, the lens of a child are not considered in the designs of these risk transfer mechanisms. From our work on the ground in 190 countries, we also know that greater funding in disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and anticipatory action can be a game changer in building resilience and reducing climate risk for children before a disaster happens. Additionally, we know that investments can maximize the efficiency of humanitarian funding for future disasters by a factor of 3 to 10 times. However, funding for this is also very limited. Looking forward into the next lessons learned, we realize that in order to solve these problems, we need to have a holistic enterprise risk management approach to address the full spectrum of climate risk for children. We need to invest in anticipatory action and rapid response mechanisms to get better outcomes and greater response across both ends of the humanitarian development nexus. This is why we designed the UNICEF Today and Tomorrow initiative, which is a fully integrated climate change solution for children and youth, where we're looking to invest in resilience and preparedness today, and we're also looking to purchase protection for children tomorrow through a parametric risk transfer insurance product. The pilot phase of the Today and Tomorrow initiative will look to protect children against tropical cyclones in 8 countries, which are Bangladesh, Comoros, Madagascar, Mozambique, Haiti, Fiji, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu. This is also an integrated fundraising approach where for every dollar raised, the majority of funding will go into our Today's protection system, while a portion of funding will go to purchase a risk transfer instrument, in this case, a child-centric, first-of-its-kind parametric risk insurance product with the goal of up to $100 million of funding. Of coverage. This leads us to the third lesson learned. Successful design and implementation of an innovation and a product like this requires bringing in the right experts. I get to speak up here, but in UNICEF, we gathered a lot of experts internally to design this structure. This includes our colleagues in our program climate team and an emergency team. This includes our innovative financing team in the private sector, and Vanna is here from that team today. It includes our finance and operations team, our legal team, and Joe is here today, so do come and say hi to our folks afterwards. And also members of our supply division team, and Soren is here, who leads our overall engagement with the insurance sector for UNICEF. But this also involved bringing in experts from the outside, starting with Willis Towers Watson's climate team, headed by Rowan Douglas, for their advisory and brokering services for implementing TNT. Led by Simon Young and Victoria Seifert, We had countless meetings, countless interviews, countless engagement to design this structure in itself. This included developing a bespoke, child-centric parametric insurance trigger, which we call the Child Cyclone Index, which captures for the first time ever both the number of children affected by cyclone events and the magnitude of impact. This makes our Today and Tomorrow initiative the first prearranged and event-based climate disaster risk financing mechanism that specifically targets the child protection gap. Finally, because this initiative was new to UNICEF, we also brought in the Center for Disaster Protection. I think Sophie's in the room as well here who helped us on this, to not conduct not but one, but two independent reviews to validate our design and approach and provide recommendations to consider for a successful implementation. That leads to our final lessons learned. In order to successfully execute, partnerships are critical. The German and the UK governments became pioneer donors and partners for the UNICEF Today and Tomorrow initiative through the World Bank administered GRIF Trust Fund under the V20 G7 Global Shield Initiative. I can't tell you how critical this was, especially to get support internally. This early support was critical to ensure that we could purchase these types of parametric cyclone risk insurance coverage without cannibalizing existing humanitarian funding sources, which is critical and still needed. We also see that on-the-ground partnership and coordination matters. With UNICEF already on the ground in every single 8 pilot countries, we're there before, during, and after an emergency. To successfully execute, we know we need to work with local, community, district, and national levels to ensure the greatest impact and to reach the most vulnerable. Finally, we come to our partnership with those in this room. Through the Today and Tomorrow parametric insurance placement process, we were introduced to this world for the first time. And it's important, and we learned the importance of having partners like our lead insurer, AXA Climate, who help lead the way to get effective pricing and coverage, and the likes of Global Parametrics, who provided additional backstop capacity through its Natural Disaster Fund. I bet other folks that are that's giving capacity like Renaissance Re in this room, and it's been a privilege to meet you in person itself. That being said, there are also challenges in moving this forward. Within UNICEF, we had to undergo an institutional change, and this really represented a paradigm shift in our way of thinking to do this business, which took time. We also didn't realize that the insurance sector had to also go through changes to overcome their own challenges to work with our sector. This included time to finalize coverage and to make claims on payments. I bring this up because while we were doing this insurance payment process, 4 major cyclones hit our pilot countries. I remember getting a message from the Pacific asking if the insurance policy is in place, saying that 2 major cyclones hit Vanuatu within 1 week, and if we had the funding, we could use them for humanitarian emergency cash transfers to assist the most affected families and communities. I remember getting a message from Mozambique asking if funding will be coming because the cholera situation, due to the knock-on effects of Cyclone Freddy, is just increasing. So how do we go forward? And there are 2 things I thought we should be considering and maybe discussing in the panel. The UNICEF Today and Tomorrow initiative is the beginning of a much longer journey for us. I was so impressed to see other actors in the field like World Food Program, UNDP we just heard, the International Red Cross, and others we met during these last couple of days who bring their incredible expertise to move innovative solutions like the Today and Tomorrow initiative forward. This made me reflect and think why our sector is involved in this. And it made me think that we're using public and philanthropic funds for disaster risk transfer instruments, and we're working towards a social objective. In our case, to save and improve the lives of the world's children. We're making this decision based on the impact gains for children by using these instruments. With this in mind, I would like to ask the industry to consider what could be achieved together as long-term partners. where you could also consider impact and the value of impact and the return of social impact into your pricing models, rather than a purely commercial approach to things. This, I believe, will allow us to have long-term value propositions to do more in this space. Finally, before I close, I wanted to say, if we're going to have transformational change, to have better outcomes and greater response, I would also encourage the industry to invest across the entire risk financing spectrum. Therefore, participating not only in the risk transfer instruments, but together as a sector, invest in today's building of overall climate resilience. And my final slide, I just want to share, and why I think the importance of this, is that I was just in a recent meeting talking about this structure, and a friend of mine, who's the executive director of the National Committee of UNICEF in Japan, showed me this picture that he took at the lobby of UNICEF. It says, "The world was not left to us by our parents, it was lent to us by our children." It's quite moving, and it really tells us why we're here. What really struck me in our conversation when Ken showed me this picture was that he took this picture 20 years ago. Many of the kids back there are now young adults today, and we're having the same conversation. If we want to be transformational, we need to think outside the box. We need to have a paradigm shift, both as a sector, but also as an industry. And we need to be innovative. We need to think about new types of partnerships, and do believe something like our initiative is an example of that. And we're excited with our sector to do more. Thank you.
Wonderful. What an extraordinary example. I mean, that's just amazing. Solomon met me, he's like, well, I'm new to this group. I hope I do okay. Are you kidding me? Like, we are privileged to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. What an inspiring work that you and all of your colleagues at UNICEF have done. So, excellent. All right, Garance, you have the honor of following that.
I don't want to, sorry.
Good luck to you.
For me.
So, AXA stands out among traditional global insurers as one of the few companies that have a dedicated business unit specifically to serving emerging customers. So this forward-thinking approach has not only demonstrated the viability of inclusive insurance, but it's also showcased how insights gained from this endeavor can positively influence the uptake of insurance across the board. So could you please give us some further details about this virtuous cycle and approach that you fostered within the organization? And additionally, we're keen to understand how AXA measures the impact of its emerging customers unit and evaluates the effectiveness. So,
is that all? And the whole in 3 minutes?
And you got 3 minutes.
Okay.
So enjoy.
So hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you all again. It's quite a few familiar faces. I think for those of you that were here last year, I had 2 small calls for action. One is to have more local insurers in our panels. Ta-da! The other is to create an alliance to drive net zero exclusion. I think that was a bad recommendation, not only because I'm less comfortable given what's taking place with the NZIA, but also because I think actually, you know how sometimes you think I'm not finding the love of my life, and you discover that it's your best friend and it's right in front of you. It's the same here. I think that alliance is the IDF. So that's what we're going to do.
This is a love story?
It is. Absolutely. And don't get me started. And Koswehi is now worried. So I was asked to talk about inclusion, but I'm going to start by talking about climate, which is going to be the red thread, because we often oppose the two, and one of my key points is to say we have to stop doing that. So everyone in this room, I think with absolutely no exception, will work on climate change-related risks. And I have to say that's quite reassuring, to be honest, just about as reassuring as when I was told the other day that the insurance industry is the second most regulated industry in the world. Why is that reassuring? because of what industry is the first, most regulated in the world? If I've told this to people before, you can't raise your hands. But for those who don't know, would you like to have a guess? Banking. As if insurance wasn't massively more regulated than banking. Tobacco, health,
Energy.
Funeral services.
You see, now we know why you're the boss. Not far, not exactly. Nuclear energy, the nuclear. And that's quite reassuring, right? So, so that's reassuring that all of us are working on climate change, right? Climate change-related risks, physical risks, risks on land, risks on agriculture, on infrastructure, on the macroeconomic outlook, on biodiversity, etc., risks on the ocean. And they're, of course, a priority. And they're addressed, assessed, modeled, approached through a large risks, more of a meso approach, through very strong collaboration between governments, between multilaterals, global, regional, local insurers, et cetera, and that's wonderful. And I know we're not there, and there are a lot of things to improve, in particular in terms of channeling financing, as we've seen. You know, is the ISF, is the GRIF are they going to go under the Global Shield? How is the Green Global Fund going to contribute to the ISF, et cetera, and what the good news is, those questions are on the table. But with regards to inclusion, those questions are not yet on the table because there is no inclusive insurance GRIF, social global fund, even the ISF, which is probably one of the most wonderful tools so far, and it would be great if other countries would contribute to it because that's what it was built for, is very focused on disaster risk reduction and on climate, etc. We need to earmark and have financing vehicles for inclusive insurance. And I think that we as an industry are able to collaborate, to innovate, to communicate. A lot was said yesterday on the narrative, right, of climate risk-related insurance and everything we're doing here. Communicate on our climate commitments for two reasons that are going to seem very basic to you. I think one of the reasons is because we have common beliefs and convictions. The second is we have targets. Do they still need to be clarified? Yes. Do they need to be tightened, fine-tuned? Yes. But we have targets. And we have, this makes me think, just 1 minute, this makes me think, who has read the Harari book, Sapiens? Quite a few people, right? I read the children's version because it was a bit big, and so I read it to my children. Do you remember the reason why Homo sapiens became the stronger of the human types of humans there was? So there were Neanderthals, we know, in Europe. There were Floresians around the Indonesian area. There were Denisovians, I'm never good with names, in Siberia. And then, like 100,000, 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens dominated, and today all of us are Homo sapiens. Do you remember why?
Common belief.
Common belief. Collaboration. Between people who didn't know each other. So, and it started actually with the capacity to imagine, the capacity to innovate, the capacity to create. And when you look into it, they say we don't exactly know why. It was probably a gene mutation that enabled Homo sapiens to not only talk about and communicate on facts today that were in front of them, but to imagine, to create a lion god that if you did ABC, you would then go to lion heaven. And if you didn't, a lion would attack you in the middle of the night, right? So it calls upon religion, it calls upon superstition, it calls whatever sets of belief. And with regards to climate, you know, we have hard facts, but we also have convictions and a drive to imagine, to create new solutions. With regards to inclusive insurance, this becomes less romantic all of a sudden. But we don't have targets, really. We don't have a definition, and I'm not sure we have common convictions. But I'd like to focus on the targets. Why are there also such clear targets, beyond the fact that we have beliefs and convictions and understand it better with regards to climate? Why are there targets? Because the enemy has a body. The enemy is CO2 emissions. The EU in its 2030 climate target plan, you know, has defined a clear goal: reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. compared to 1990 levels. It's a measurable goals. And then insurers have followed suit. We've followed suit. We've set goals on operations, on underwriting, on investments, common and individual goals, etc. So if we look at social protection, if we look at inclusion, if we look at inclusive insurance, or how you want to call it, and isn't that strange that we don't have one single word to name it? That's a weak signal. How can we measure that our efforts are efficiently going those that need it the most if we have no standards to measure it? If we have no methodology to measure impact? If we're not aligned on what it is we're measuring it and how to measure it? If we can't compare over time between ourselves, and over time. And as we all know, and I think we're all convinced, what isn't measurable doesn't exist. And I think the crying necessity to agree on standards is, as we all are thinking, probably in our heads, massively exacerbated by the lack of mention of insurance in the SDGs. And if you go through it, so I put it through ChatGPT, and it took me ages to get it working, to be honest, but I finally understood how to do it. Despite its potency, right, as a tool, and it's the reason, and Eko Sohi was reminding me just this morning that it's the reason of existence of the IDF, right, to contribute, to make sure that insurance efficiently contributes to the SDG goals. Insurance is mentioned just once in the Sustainable Development Goals. Risk is mentioned as a target 3 times out of 169 listed. 6 times out of 231 unique indicators, and even resilience is mentioned as a target once out of the 169 listed, and 0 times in the 231 unique indicators. And finally, we cannot continue to focus on the one hand, far away here, on climate risks, and on the other, on financial inclusion. We can't continue to say we will address climate risk, climate-related risk through meso schemes, public-private partnerships, funneling financing from donors, from corporates, from multilaterals, and then drive financial protection through micro schemes, not really having funds, not really having multilaterals and donors and corporates paying attention in the same direction. We can't keep doing that. So I think that as insurers, as the IDF, to fully play a role in the just transition, right, we need to define metrics by which we measure inclusion in the same way that it's being done for climate, and we need to bring those risks together. And so to conclude, I'm not saying it's easy, right? The enemy is much more insidious, because who's the enemy? On the one hand, it's CO2 emissions. Who's the enemy here? The enemy is political instability. It's economic volatility. It's social inequality. Deciding to have a net zero exclusion target by eliminating these enemies is probably not the way to go. Now, I wanted to take you through a few examples. I don't have time because I gave too many other examples of financial diaries, which is one way, obviously, to understand the lives of the people we're looking to protect. Because if you take the infamous 3-step process of understanding, innovating, scaling, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we innovate, which is great, a lot of time on how we scale, but do we really spend enough time and money on who it is? And Katharine and Jan really evoked this point, and they're not the only ones. Ingrid this morning also. Who are we protecting? Kathy is going to talk about how they realized with the Blue Marble Consortium, but the Rockefeller, it's not the Rockefeller Fund.
Resilience Center.
Resilience Center, went and asked themselves that question with regards to women in India who couldn't work for the very simple reasons that their tools were too hot. That's inclusion because they're offering business interruption. Saoirse was giving me the example of, in Kyrgyzstan, an insurance product that's being developed because when the snow falls, it covers the land, animals can't eat, and therefore farmers actually die. So this is an insurance product that will pay for the food for the animals until the snow melts. It's examples. We don't spend enough time, and I think donors and multilaterals and corporates should invest more in a financial diary approach, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We spent, for example, in AXA, 16 months speaking to 200 families in China, poor families, rural families, to understand their everyday life every single minute of every day starting 6 a.m. to when they go to bed at 8 p.m. So I think there is that. There's really measuring. Of course, we have to innovate. And when we think innovation, again, we think climate on one side, inclusion on the other. The IDF, thanks to the SHS working group, has put together a project in Mexico with the Mexican government to cover maize farmers with parametric insurance. And actually, the Inclusive Insurance Working Group and AXA Emerging Customers was a great part of that project. Would you like to guess why? This was parametric agricultural, so not inclusion. It's because we were the only ones that knew how to do last mile distribution. So the SHS was extremely knowledgeable on understanding the risks, on working with the government, on establishing the funds, on putting together the parametric insurance. They didn't know how to reach the last mile, these farmers, how to create an enrollment app to enroll the farmers and then have another app to pay the claims, et cetera, et cetera. So it's innovation not only on complementarity of risk, but also on complementarity of process. So I would say, just to finish, that in terms of call for action, because although I know Ecoswehi is not satisfied with what we've done with the call for action last year, but we're starting. So let me reiterate that one. We need to have more local insurers within the IDF, that's for sure, and you're going to lead the way. We need to have more insurers raise their hands for the Inclusive Insurance Working Group to also lead the way. We need to kill the silos. If I haven't said it once, I've said it 1,000 times, to kill the silos. And that means killing the silos operationally, because then I'm told, no, but health is included. Health related to climate change is included in financing. Also, that means that anything that's not linked to climate change with related to health, we don't fund. Is the pandemic due to climate change? Can anyone really answer that question? So why are we making the difference between the two? We need to have earmarked funds that also go to health, that also go to protection. So we need to kill the silos operationally on processes, but also on bundling risks. In the Mexican example, to not give another one because I'm running out of time, we're going to add, so right now the farmers are protected for their land, and we're going to add health and protection to these farmers. We're bundling it. But we also need to kill the silos at the political level by ensuring, for example, that the Global Shield discussions encompass health and protection, not only climate. My second call for action is to set standards, as you've heard, on inclusive protection. And we're probably the only forum, the IDF, that can do it. Again, I had given the idea of an alliance. It's a bad idea. Let the IDF be that alliance. Let the IDF give itself the means to agree on methodologies which enable us to understand the populations that we're looking to protect. That means financial diaries, that means surveys, that means focus groups. It's not very expensive. Let the IDF be the place where we know we agree on how we're going to measure inclusion. And here, I mean, if you look at your own companies, how do you measure inclusion? I swear to you, each of you are going to come up with a different result. Is it the number of people covered? Is there a family multiplier to that? A lot of insurers decide to only calculate in their GWP small premiums. Or they include what they call minorities, that are minority segments. So gig workers, smallholder farmers, and then very often you'll find women. Really? I think I'm okay. They include that. In other circumstances, they include philanthropic or CSR initiatives in the GWP where they calculate inclusion. We don't have the right KPI, and I don't think it should be a very complicated one. And third, we need to assess the impact of what we're doing. And I think this point was referred to by Ingrid Hoven this morning, where she said, let's not go back to the way we usually do things with funds, with projects, that the main issue we have is who is governing it and who is making the decision. Let's really measure that impact. And I'm not saying going to smallholder farmer by smallholder farmer or person by person out of the 25 million or 50 million or 150 million that we're looking to protect. There's an in-between. And if you look at today the impact measurement tools that are at our fingertips, they concern pension funds, they concern asset managers, they concern banks, very little concern insurers. And I think we have the means to do that. So maybe that's the call for action for next year.
Thank you very much. And I was concerned you might not have enough to say. So
Sorry.
very good. Okay, we're going to move right along to Ashok. So, Ashok, APA Insurance is a prominent player in the inclusive insurance sector in Kenya, and your leadership is highly regarded within the space both locally and globally. You've played a significant role by leading a consortium of insurers in implementing the government's agricultural insurance coverage, and also extended your services to other risk lines that complement the protection net that's provided by social welfare programs in the country. So could you please provide some insight into APA's recent inclusive insurance initiatives, specifically focusing on how they articulate various stakeholders to address the challenges on the ground, as well as how the engagement with the IDF may help you in achieving your objectives?
Right. The main thing is that APA is one of the largest insurers in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. We are very good at traditional insurances, but what's happening is that I have the privilege as the group CEO to take on a role that, I can decide what I want to do. So about 12 years ago, I said that I'll concentrate on microinsurance because with, Kenya has got about 2.7% penetration, and the people who need insurance the most do not have anybody looking at them. So we saw that this is an opportunity that we could grow, and we could actually create an area of business that we would have a completely new group of people, younger people dealing with it. And so it was to unlearn your traditional insurance and relearn the new inclusive insurance. And inclusive insurance is all about bundling. What you do is you bundle, health, life, general insurance, agriculture insurance. So you can take a product to the people who and see what are their needs and have the solutions. So in Kenya, like most third world countries, there is very little welfare for them, and we have been talking about PPPs in the last years since yesterday. And we've had so many, we've been working to the ministries and we've been discussing with governments, bodies about PPPs. And they're always very difficult to finalize and come across. So we looked at inclusive insurance. We were able to convince the regulator that inclusive insurance is something that they should support. So we have the microinsurance regulations that have come out, and what the regulations do is that any small bundled insurance or small premium and small sum insureds cannot be now done by traditional insurers. So you have to now become a microinsurer and form a company. So we have actually started that process. And one of the things about APA insurance is that, like everybody else, I'm sure in this room, sustainability is very important. Sustainability of your own organization and also the people that you are dealing with. So we can take sustainability to the people who need it the most. Our our ambition is that reach the needy, reach them with the solutions that affect them best. So our action was to create our own structures because we were not able to do do a PPP with the government, and we get some subsidy from the government, but it's not always on time and not always guaranteed. So we said that let's just go and actually go and deliver the product, and then deal with that solution on the basis that we ourselves can support it. So many a times the support is basically comes from us. In the first few, perhaps when you have a solution that you're taken to somebody, it will be a loss maker, and it's the losses that you have to be able to sustain. But then you have to grow it. So there are two products that we really started off with. One was the livestock insurance. Fortunately for Kenya, we don't have the type of disasters that we are talking about, the major disasters. But our biggest problem is famine, drought. In the old days, it used to be 1 in 4, a drought once every 4 years. Now it is almost every year. So what is happening is that the pastoralists in northern Kenya, we had this unique product called CLIP, which was basically not covering the animals, but actually covering the forage on the ground. So we would measure the forage that is available, and we would then basically, as soon as a trigger was reached that the forage was less than 20%, then we would pay the pastoralist by mobile money, enough money to get them to be able to buy food and water for animals until the next rainy season. So that is that one. Now that's now become the DRIVE project in Eastern Africa. The other one was we started off with, and the support of Rockefeller Foundation was one of the supporters, was to start insuring farmers. Initially, it was all weather index. And what we found was that the weather index did not work. Parametrics for us doesn't work at all. We found that, we would insure farmers, and each automated weather station would cover 30 kilometers of radius. Now, we would go to the farmers and say, according to us, there was enough rain. And the farmers would say, sorry, we didn't have enough rain because there are so many microclimates. So the agriculture side has evolved into a sort of area yield. So what we do is that we go and insure the farmer on the basis of the area that they have, and we just and the crop is then at the time of the harvest we would do crop cuts, and then the crop cuts are announced to the farmers, and we would then pay up to 70% of the loss. So basically, the farmer now has a constant income all the time. But what has happened is the success of this particular the agriculture insurance was that we were able to form amongst our competitors. We were able to form 7 of us got together. This 7 of us getting together gave us one capacity, ability to distribute to a larger network of farmers. And thirdly, what it did was that we were able to go to a reinsurer, and the support that we got from Swiss Re, in the early days was one of the most important one, because they briefed us, and we were able to now take 20% of the risk amongst the 7 of us, and 80% was reinsured. So this gave us basically a long ability to go into the farmers. So now we've grown up to, we are doing about 2 million farmers, and that will continue, because the Kenyan population, 70% of the Kenyan population is in farming, which is about 35 million. So what we hope to do is that we need to grow on that one. But the thing that basically inclusive insurance does for us is that we can start collaborations, and our collaborations now are not across only amongst the insurance companies, but we are moving into what I would consider a value chain. So there's a health product we just brought out with several different partners. We insure the inpatient. The outpatient is capitated with about 700 clinics in the country. And what is happening is that there is a digital platform that we are using that registers the people who are insured. And then what would happen is all the claims are dealt through the digital platform. So the collaboration is across different players with different areas. So the idea is perhaps not go to the farmers or to anybody who needs the insurance, but is to basically become part of the value chain. If we become part of the value chain, then we need to look for a financier, if it was a crop, for the inputs, And so aggregators are very important because aggregators provide inputs, and then what we do is we cover not only the crop yields at the end of the season, but we also give funeral covers, we give health covers, and we also give them some other benefits in that bundle. So the thing is how can we as insurers make a difference amongst the people we want to insure? So what we have done is that if you come to Nairobi, if you've been to Nairobi, there are about 4 slums. And in those slums, we had about 2 million people living on those slums. Now, we are looking at some solution that we can take to the slum dwellers. And the solution that we want to do is that we want to, we have designed a solution, and we're trying to take it up to scale, is we give them, in case they live in rooms, if their room is burnt, then we'll give them a particular amount of money. Then if they're hospitalized, then we'll give them cash. We give them cash for income support. And then if there is a bereavement in the family, then what we would do is for 6 months we'll give them family support so that the family can get back to normal. So those are the different products that we are bringing in. Now, the problem that we have is that I think most third world countries, and I think everybody has spoken about it, is that the public sector is not really looking at these people. They're not looking at them. They're not really willing to support them. They know there is a problem, but their focus and priorities are very different from us. So as insurers, what we can do is that we have to now become welfare providers. Obviously, we want to make sure that the welfare that we provide is economical to us. For inclusive insurance, we do not want to make the large profit that normally your board will ask, but we would be making sure that as long as we are breaking even and making sure that we can reach a larger number of people who need the covers, then we basically say that let's go ahead with it. In a way, I'm privileged, or that as the board and shareholders of APA Insurance are willing to support this initiative, and also giving us the time to really make it work and grow. We believe that maybe in the next 4 or 5 years, inclusive insurance will be giving APA Insurance something like 20% of the income. If that target is met, then what would happen is that we will be able to say that we have now reached more people, and at the same time supported ourselves in doing new things.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, any one of those examples would have been just fascinating to this audience, but what a breadth of ways that you're protecting the people of Kenya, and the fact that it's gotten to the point of critical mass where now it's really a foundational part of a commercial enterprise that's truly viable, and it's meeting people's needs in this way. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. All right, Kathy, you are up.
Thank you.
So
I'm going to take the privilege of being the fourth.
Go for it. So very.
May I ask you to stand, please? We need some energy up in here. Okay, so take your right hand on your left wrist and lean to the right. And stretch. Okay. And then take your left hand and put it on your right wrist and go to the left. Okay. And now just shout something, like, "Woo!" Woo! Yes. Okay. Better? Okay. Ready? Okay. Woo!
All right.
It's hard, it's hard to come and to listen. There's so much amazing information, and we're processing so much, and we're working at different scales. We're working in different sectors. We're connecting and trying to move money and help people and all this sort of stuff, and we're in a room sitting quietly, and it's just hard on the human body. So, okay, I think we're talking about who are we working with? Who are we doing this for? What does inclusive mean? Who are we including? I have a very simple mission in this short intervention. Aside from plugging my innovation session, which comes after, and I'm bringing alcohol and chocolate, and there's dancing. Yes, and there are free gifts. And so please come, please come. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so I am Kathy Baughman-McLeod. I'm the director of the Arsht Rock Resilience Center. We have the Rockefeller Foundation in our name. They are our primary funder, but we're not the foundation, and so sometimes that creates confusion. I'm raising money, I'm not giving it. That's really important. We have recently announced a partnership with the Self-Employed Women's Association, a 50-year-old labor union for women in the informal sector in India, 50 years old. So when you think about inclusive insurance and finding the right partners, there are 2.6 million women in this union. And so the system and the system of trust exists already in this union. And so they have a discipline of savings. They have bank accounts of their own. They have access to childcare, access to health care. The one thing knocking them back or dragging them further into poverty is climate impacts. So let me introduce you to three of the sisters of Seva. And when you hear people say, this is Gita Ben or this is Rima Ben, Ben means sister, Bai means brother, and so you'll see that. So could we go to the next slide, please? Oh, is that me? Am I supposed to do that? Thank you very much. Okay, this is Manju. Manju is a waste recycler. Manju's mother, Manju's dad died when she was 5, and Manju's mom, they needed money. And so many of you in the room, you know that one of the places to go to make money, you don't need a lot of skills, is to go to the waste recycling site and pull things that can be recycled, sold for recycling. And Manju started doing that when she was 10. And her mom joined Seva, and she, through the process of joining Seva herself, she became a grassroots leader. She has an undergraduate degree, and she organizes the waste recyclers. And so she has 3 kids of her own, 3 daughters. They are not waste recyclers. They are in school every day. Part of that is the membership of Seva. Next slide, please. This is Gita Ben. Gita is a street vendor in Ahmedabad, and she also has 2 kids. Her mom was a street vendor and her dad. When she sells her merchandise in the markets, merchandise is often on the ground or on a very low table, and so she needs to sit near her merchandise. And so if she sits on the asphalt, it's too hot for her to do that. So she needs to sit on something that doesn't burn her body when she sits. And the sun and the temperatures are exploding the jars that hold her merchandise that she's selling. So next slide, please. This is Shobha Ben. She's a street vendor. She also, all of that merchandise is exposed to the heat and the sun, and it gets ruined. She tries to shade it with her umbrella, but the city doesn't like the umbrella because the umbrella blocks the cameras that the city uses, and so they surreptitiously use their umbrellas wherever they can to try to get some shade. Shobha Ben also has 2 kids. Her mother was a waste recycler, but upskilled and came to the market and has been selling in Ahmedabad. And all of these women are facing, Garon said, they have blisters on their hands from tools that they use that are too hot and they're not made for those temperatures. So construction workers and shipbreakers, so blisters on their hands. They have a rash that they used to have, a heat rash, maybe 4 months out of the year. It's now 12 months out of the year from the temperatures. They are having miscarriages. They have headaches. They're passing out. They have their stories of the construction workers who pass out on the ladders they're using and fall to their death. And so these are very real, costly. This is the main point here for SEVA. This is about their income. They're the primary breadwinners of their family most of the time. And now that they are unable to work during certain parts of the day because it's too hot to be outside working, they have shifted the work hours toward the night when it's cooler. But the women can't work in that shift because they have to take care of their kids. And so they are home cooking and taking care of their kids. And so they are missing that shift, which means they miss that income. They make on average $3 a day. And so we have worked very closely with SEVA to understand in lots of focus groups and lots of meetings what it is that would be helpful. And it is income supplement for them in the face of the loss of that income due to extreme heat. So we formed a partnership with SEVA. We found Blue Marble and engaged Blue Marble, and Jaime is here, CEO of Blue Marble. And we very quickly, and this is the point, this heat season started, really May was what we had in mind as the hottest months. May, June, hottest, and then July it starts to cool off a little bit. And cool, I mean, we're talking about the salt pan workers are working in temperatures of like 50, and for the Fahrenheit folks in the room, that's like 123, 24, something like that. So we went to understand, okay, what is it that you need? Yes, you need income, but they need more protections to be able to work because they need the money. And so we quickly moved to, let's get on risk in time for heat season. How do we do that quickly? We want a forecast-based product, but we don't have time. We need to work with the regulators in India to get to the forecast-based. We are Schrock. We have built an algorithm that predicts the health impacts about 5 days out. More on that later. And that algorithm would let us know, hey, that heat wave that's going to hurt your body is coming 5 days out, and send money now. And so money goes to their bank accounts, their own bank accounts, and they can't participate in the program unless they have their own bank account. And so part of this process included adding 3,000 or 4,000 new bank accounts for SEVA members. And so we have this financial inclusion element of this. We also sought to understand what are the physical things, the items, the equipment that would help you work better in the heat. So they need gloves so they don't burn their hands. They need tarps that cover the crops to keep them from burning in the sun and the heat. They need coolers to keep their produce in, to keep it from spoiling. The water they're drinking in the plastic bottles, the carcinogens in the plastic is getting into the water. That's also making them sick. So they need a way to keep their water at a safe temperature. And so we did a physical element, which would be the risk reduction. So we have the risk transfer in the parametric based on a 3-day average of temperature. We have the risk reduction. We realized, we were there 3 weeks ago when it kicked off, we realized they don't have access to early warning. They don't know when the heat wave is coming. Even if the Indian Med Service is providing it, they're not accessing it. So they function through WhatsApp. And their grassroots leader, their 100 grassroots leaders signed up 21,000 women in about 4 weeks. And they use WhatsApp to do that. And so we will be putting an early warning system for heat and other into the WhatsApp chat so they have some notice and they can get ready. They can rearrange what they're going to do. They can do different things with their kids. They can change what they're going to do during the day. And then the last piece is that financial inclusion piece, that everybody in the program has their own bank account. And so none of this is possible without their partnership, and their trust in that network of the Self-Employed Women's Association meant that they would try something new and what sounded pretty funky to them, that I'm going to come to your house, I'm going to bring an iPad, I want you to put your bank account in here, I want you to fill out all this information, and you might get paid. I don't know. You might get paid if it's too hot. And so it was the trust of that organization that enabled us to be able to try to bring a solution. So I think the three things, if you come this afternoon, there's more to say, but the three things I want to say is that they know what they want. You know, the idea that we're coming in with this, we're here with our solutions now, it doesn't work. You know, they know what they need. They don't want a handout. They want to work. There are lots of stories I could tell about. They just want to work and they want to pay their own way. And they do participate financially in this in the program. And lastly, they have agency. They're fighting like hell. And so I am here, as I said, I'm not giving out money. I'm here raising money. So we want to do more of this. And there are some of you in the audience here that we have had conversations. There's some exciting things ahead. We think that with the right partner like SEVA in other parts of the world, that this can be replicated. We still have to do the evaluations. It still hasn't paid out. There's a basis risk issue that everybody faces in these sorts of things. But the bigger point is that these are the people that we are doing this with. You know, I might have said for, but we're doing this with them, and they are affording us the privilege to be able to help. Thank you.
Wow, that's fantastic. Okay, we're over time, but just to close this out, if you could just very quickly, back to you, Solomon, to wrap us all up. Just what's a wish list of 3 things that could help you scale up the Today and Tomorrow program?
Oh, okay, very quickly. I think we really want to show utility of this integrated approach. It's easy for us, I think, in terms of once payouts come to show value. As Soren, who's part of supply division, you know, UNICEF has the largest humanitarian warehouse in the world. Already in Mozambique last month, I was just looking it up. Last month, you know, I talked about the cholera outbreak. You know, we reached nearly 1 million people with interventions, including supplying emergency wash supplies. So we could show the utility on the tomorrow and the payout and the parametric risk transfer instrument. But I think now, as for a pilot internally, we need to show the utility on the today part and to capitalize that, to move that forward. And it's not just for the fact that, you know, we heard today investing in resilience is so important. And I also explained that, you know, every time you invest in the today part and resilience, your humanitarian response gets magnified by 3 to 10 times. That's what our data shows. But I want to just reference a conversation that we had yesterday, I think, with Jeff from Renaissance Re and Bridget from ADB. Is that when these parametric triggers parametric risk transfer instruments actually trigger, you don't hear it in the news. When you hear it in the news, it's when they don't trigger it.
Yeah.
That's true.
And so that's why we need to move the conversation to risk financing across the entire spectrum. And that's why investing in resilience today should be seen in that perspective. So for example, we invested in building of over 1,000 climate resilient classrooms constructed in 2019 in Mozambique. Not one of those classrooms were destroyed during Cyclone Freddy.
Wow.
No, that feels good.
So that's the risk, you know, financing dialogue and structure that we need to. So I think showing utility of that today part is what's needed. I think the second thing is really, let's look at that value proposition. And I talked about pricing and impact and returns on impact into the model. But you know, with climate and everything, there's so much uncertainty. How do you price that? There's a lot of expertise here, and I think we need to come together and convene and think about that to have something that could create a long-term value proposition in terms of how we look at the model and the pricing going forward. And I think if we have those things, we could show utility, we could have a long-term value proposition. For us, at least for the today, tomorrow, I would love to move it from a pilot to a platform.
Yep.
And what does that mean? How do we look at it, not just looking at cyclone risk, other perils such as drought and flooding. And I love the conversations I heard here. It makes me start thinking, maybe looking at different types of risk layering, not just have trigger-based financing when the worst case scenario happens.
Yeah.
You know, maybe having trigger-based financing before an event happens, if you think about leading indicators for something like for drought and other things. So these are the conversations. So I think the last, you know, let's look at being long-term partners together on this.
All right. Well, on that concept of long-term partnership, let's thank these amazing Pathfinders. Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Good job.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Ken, and also thank you to the panelists for really incredible insights. I will not even attempt to summarize that, just the emphasis on partnerships. And yes, let's connect across the halls after this. So we will now break for lunch and networking. So lunch will end at 1:30. And after that, we will then have the innovation afternoon, which will run between 1:30 to 3 o'clock. And there are 3 sessions. We've already heard from Kathy about her session, which is on the Extreme Heat Income Insurance Initiative, protecting women in the informal sector with a blend of interventions, and that will be upstairs. The second session will be from prevention to protection, the role of insurance in disaster risk reduction. This will be in room F006, and Saoirse will be able to guide you to the specific room, which I believe is on this level. And then the third will be science meets practice, rigorous impact evaluation of insurance programs. And that's in room F005, which will be on this level. And we will upload the slides, so after lunch, you can then see where to go, etc. But really just thank you for your attentive attention for the session this morning, this afternoon, and we will reconvene soon.